All right, this is the September 22nd Engineering Productivity Office Hours. We have Remy, Jinshin, and Mark here. I kind of seeded a topic that that prompted Mark to show up, and I'm very grateful for that, so thank you. But I wanted to focus in on how we can optimize front-end cycle time and feedback loops. For context, engineering productivity, when we try to shorten the pipeline duration for the single, like the GitLab single repo, we primarily focus on backend, and front-end exclusive pipelines don't always get the attention they need. And I thought office hours might be a good opportunity to kind of hear where front-end engineers maybe have points of friction or have delays in their process that we can understand a little bit better and then try to optimize. So the question I started with is very open-ended, like how can we optimize front-end cycle time or feedback loops? But maybe a better question for Mark is, where do you encounter friction as you're creating MRs in the GitLab single repo, especially around like feedback that you would get in the pipeline or just contributor tooling altogether?
Well, I think this is outside of the scope of this, but I'll mention it anyway. I think on the GitLab project, just waiting for a pipeline to start and appear in the list is a bit of a pain, and this comes up when doing reviews as well. You know, if I think a merge request looks good, I want to approve, run a pipeline, and merge when it succeeds, but I need to wait for the pipeline to begin before I can do the MWPS. I think that's outside of the scope of this discussion, but it's something that does bug me, so I brought it up. In terms of the actual CI run, to be honest, for me, it's kind of like set it and forget it. I know it'll take a while, so I just trigger it and wait for it to come back. The issues I run into more often are when I want to run a spec locally. So when front-end fixtures are involved. Generating these fixtures locally is a huge pain. I've never done it successfully. I always have to go to CI and download the fixtures that are generated there. Because I think it can take like half an hour or more to generate all of them. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the right way to do it, but I guess if I've never been in the position where I needed to make a change to a spec that required a change to a fixture, because then I would kind of have to do it locally or send it up to a CI, and then that would be a very slow feedback loop. What else?
So one thing on that, before we move on to anything else, and Remy, Jinshin, jump in here. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that like people are doing that at all, the downloading the fixtures from CI. That almost, and I think you're working with Albert on removing the front end fixture. I know that you and him were going back and forth on that. That kind of points to having some sort of programmatic way of storing those or retrieving them. Would help your workflow, your local workflow. Am I kind of capturing that correctly?
Yes, there was talk about having them be part of the repository, and sort of removing the fixture generation from the sort of serial flow of the pipeline and just having a check that fixtures have changed. That would be great if we could do it, but there's a lot of discussion there about having stable fixtures. Because if they're not stable, then we'll run into problems there.
Do you know if that downloading the fixtures from CI is common? Like, do you know other front-end engineers who do that?
I think that is almost always the recommended approach. Someone every now and again will ask a question, I'm trying to generate the fixtures, but it's failing, or it's taking forever, or it's hung or something like that. What do I do? And the feedback is almost always go to CI, download the fixtures. We might even have it in the handbook somewhere.
It sounds like even like there's a middle ground between let's programmatically store and control fixtures with just provide better local tooling for you to get fixtures from a pipeline. Because I imagine that's a somewhat convoluted process that involves retrieving build artifacts directly, or is there a different way of doing that?
It's not too convoluted. So I would just go to a job, go to one of the front-end fixtures jobs, and I think, I can't remember, either download the artifact zip and then extract it locally. It's not too big. It's much quicker to do that than to run the fixtures locally, run the fixture generation locally. So I'm actually kind of happy with that process as it is. It's just, it's not obvious if you've never done it before, I want to generate this, how do I get it? It's not intuitive to go to the pipeline job artifacts.
And kind of the workflow I'm thinking is just like a script that we can add to the GitLab project that says, get the fixtures by default from master, or if you pass like a pipeline URL to it, or your MR or some sort of argument, it will try to retrieve the latest front end fixtures and put them in the right spot. So you're not navigating, downloading, saving them, extracting them in a different directory. It just does that all for you. Yeah,
maybe making it part of GDK, part of the GDK setup process or something like that. Like a GDK update might be a sensible place to do that.
Okay. That was super interesting. I kind of stopped you as you were going to move on to something else. I'm happy to move on to something else. And then the other thing I want to check in on is Albert's point in 1C to see if you have any feedback on that as well.
Nothing has come to mind, so let's move on and maybe something will come to mind.
Okay. So I haven't read this. Remy, Jinshin, did you have a chance to read Albert's question here?
Not yet.
Okay, so he's in 1C, he says, what do front-end folks think of replacing get JSON fixture with import to better track dependencies? And there's an example where he's looking at that. Mark, is there a way that we can, what's an easy way to get feedback from just everyone in front end? Just drop something in the front end channel and say, hey, we're experimenting with this. One of the things we're running into is just not having the subject matter expertise or familiarity with front end developer workflows to know where to go as Albert's running into things like this, or Remy or Jinshin.
So I think the front end Slack channel is one option. In my experience, it's quite, it's hard to get a lot of feedback there. You might get some, but if the right person is not looking at it at the right time, they won't see it. Another option is the front end weekly call. Putting it as an agenda item in there. There's some complication there because we actually have 3 different time zones depending on the week. The one that's at I think 1 p.m. UTC or something like that is probably the one that has the most people in it. So maybe that's the best one to target. And that's better because the people who are there because they want to contribute and hear about things. So you're more likely, I think, to get feedback there. Another option is the front-end maintainers office hours. We've actually been discussing that we often don't have much to discuss in those. So it would be great to have outsiders, it's open office hours. So it's great to have people come in. Exactly. This kind of thing is perfect for that. So absolutely bring it to front-end maintainers office hours as well. It's a lot of reaching out, I guess, but.
That's okay. I think as we grow as a company, that's the kind of mechanisms we need to get used to. How do we meet people where they are and get the information we're looking for? So that's awesome feedback. Okay.
I have 2 questions. I wonder if front-end developer would hit into a case that the local fixtures which were downloaded were outdated. So they hit into some errors and don't realize that they just need to update the fixtures. Could it be possible?
Yes, I'm almost certain that's happened. It's not happened. Well, actually, no, that may well have happened to me. In that situation, I knew what I had to do. I had to find the merge base and then pull the fixtures from from the closest CI job that ran on that merge base. But that might not be obvious to everyone. I don't know. So that's a very real problem. And I think, again, bringing it back to making these part of the repository, I think that would solve that problem if we could have stable fixture generation. It would just completely remove, then we wouldn't need to do the GDK thing we talked about earlier. I think someone said that somewhere that putting these in the repository increases the repository size. I'm not sure that, I don't know if that matters, to be honest. But yeah.
I see. And I have another question, that is it possible to specify which fixtures a test would need, so that maybe locally we just generate part of the fixtures instead of a whole everything?
Right, so that, I guess that's what Albert's proposal of using import rather than get JSON fixture is about, because Jest has this find related tests functionality. And if you use the import mechanism, I'm assuming that he's tested this out, because I don't know if it would work, to be honest. I don't see why not.
Cool.
Dynamic imports should work. So I like the idea of that, but I think Albert's already identified potential problems. Like, what has he said? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know enough about the details. I guess one of the problems is that import being asynchronous means that the tests would have to be refactored, whereas the get JSON fixture is synchronous. So that might cause a bit of a problem, but not too much of one. No, that's not a big problem at all, actually. You could just do it in a before all or something. That's something worth verifying, though, because of its asynchronous nature. How would we make sure that Jest really picks that up? Yeah, I'm not too sure on the details of that.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. I bolded that because I think that will be the thing Albert looks for most, like the challenge of converting and looking into it. So he has limited experience in the front end space, but I think he's doing really well at kind of identifying these things. And that's where the other collaboration opportunities you talked about can kind of help propel us forward faster with some of these. Cool. I guess the other thing, we started the selective Jest test execution, where we just run related tests prior to approval, similar to what we were doing with RSpec on minimal jobs. Have you heard any feedback on that or anything on how it's going?
I have not. And to be honest, I've not noticed it myself. So that's actually enabled, is it?
Yeah, I think it's been enabled for 2 weeks. But so there are some caveats to it. So you may not have noticed it because if you're updating GraphQL, I think it still runs the full set by default every time. So Remy, you might know more about that because I think you were working on an MR with him, with Albert.
I think I know the MR you mean. And I think I reviewed that. That might even be merged now. So maybe that problem is gone. Basically, it just needed to know that GraphQL was part of the resolve tree it needed to build. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was merged this week.
So, I mean, the effect should be shorter pipelines, right? With this. So no news is good news.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ideally what we're looking for is to accelerate that feedback. So you talked about set it and forget it. We want to get to a state where it's set it and you get the feedback much faster. Like you're probably waiting 80 minutes, like 70 to 80 minutes or more for your pipeline to complete, assuming review, deploy, and everything else that happens by default on front end pipeline graphs. I think setting an ambitious target somewhere closer to like 30 in the far out future, like 30 or 15 is where we need to look to get. And these
So-
sort of, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I tend to just wait for the test stage to be completed. If I see a green test stage, I'm pretty confident that the MR will go green completely. So that's what I wait for. And I would suspect that's what most front-end engineers wait for. They just want to know, have the jest test passed? That should be, I guess, one of the first things to succeed, because it is effectively unit tests, but then feature specs as well. And they are the ones that can take the longest, I guess.
I see.
So will it be helpful if those jobs were done and people get notified? Because at this moment, I don't think people will get notified. So they need to check from time to time.
Maybe. It's more like, I know that there's no point running the rest of the pipeline if anything in test fails. So it's more like I'd want to just immediately fail the whole pipeline at that point and just not bother waiting for the rest. From my perspective. I don't think that's practical for everyone. But yeah, like it might be useful for me to say, you know, add a label to an MR saying fail pipeline if tests fail or something like that on first test failure. Then I know that there's something wrong and I need to fix it. I just realized this is changing subjects. Sorry, this is changing subjects suddenly. PO file generation, GitLab pot. That's an annoyance when everything works except you forgot to update get text strings. And regenerating get text strings is very slow. And it seems to me like that should be a relatively fast process, but it takes like, I don't know, a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes or something like that. So if that could be improved, if that could be sort of done faster, that would be great. There was an issue about making that part of the CI pipeline where it commits it automatically, but there were discussions about not doing that for reasons which makes sense. So
what about if the job which failed the check contains the artifact? You can just download and put into your copy and commit it.
That sounds really great. I like that idea.
Yeah, that shouldn't be difficult to do. Just need to save them into the artifacts.
Yeah, because you've been told it's wrong, then you've got to generate it yourself anyway. So
yeah.
having just been given it would be nice. Yeah.
It's like a punishment. Like you have to generate this locally after it being wrong. Like it's kind of.
You've done it wrong, backwards. But I won't tell you how.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think it already provides you a diff, maybe?
Yes.
It does provide you a diff.
I think so, yes.
Okay, so in theory, you could sort of copy that diff and then apply it locally, and that should work.
I believe, yes. I never thought about it, but I believe, yeah.
I guess that's error prone though, if you don't copy the diff quite right.
Yeah, it needs to be something automatic, or at least like one script call or something like that away, something that's geared for your local tooling. Automatic might be too strong. Like we don't want to like modify your local directory when there's a pipeline failure, but at least give you a tool to do it yourself. Anything else front end? Like Mark, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time and perspective on this. Anything else that we have on that before we move on to 2 with Remy?
No, nothing that I can think of.
Okay, if anything comes up, so I'll kind of encourage Albert and we'll take a look at those meetings to see how we can join a little bit and drop more notes in the front end maintainers channels to engage with that. If anything comes up or anything comes to mind, just drop a Slack in G Engineering Productivity, our Slack channel, and we'll be happy to collaborate further that way. Okay.
Great, sounds good.
Cool. If you want to hang out for talking about pipeline docs, like by all means, stick around. But if not, I really appreciate your time.
Thanks. I think I will hang out just to hear what you have to say. So,
All right. All right, Remy, let's take this one. I bet you have some good ideas.
Not sure about that, but yeah, no, I just saw this comment from Drew today, and about basically the point is that our pipeline documentation, so the documentation about our pipeline config and also all the tricks that you can use in pipelines. So for instance, the labels to run full like all RSpec jobs, or to run as if FOSS jobs, stuff like that. These are kind of buried in the documentation. It's not very easy to find. So yeah, my point is more like a brainstorming thing, how could we improve maybe this documentation to be more on point, or maybe could be just like put some items at the top for things that are that are actually actionable for people. For instance, the details about the implementation of our pipelines are probably not that important for day-to-day work for most people. So that could go probably like we could put it in the bottom of the page, and I don't know, highlight a few items that people run into frequently. And I was also thinking maybe we need to educate. So maybe, I don't know, create some, like even some videos maybe to explain these tricks. Because we mentioned these new labels, the pipeline labels to like for the run all RSpec, run as if FOSS, stuff like that. We mentioned those in, I think, in Slack and Engineering Week in Review, but that's actually something that it's not a one-time thing. Like we need to remind people about that, I think, regularly. So maybe, yeah, that's things to improve. So I don't know if anyone has any idea.
I personally don't really look at the documentation from time to time. I will probably read it once, then forget about it. So any newly added content, I won't really read. And I think unless we make the documentation very short, it's going to be longer and longer unless we remove contents. So it's getting more and more difficult to look up things. And for this kind of thing, I always feel like I personally won't mind if some automation add comments on the merge request. I don't know if it will be noisy for other people, but like having a comment saying that this is a minimal pipeline, be sure to approve and rerun it. Things like that would be fine for me. And I think that would be super obvious for people, of course. I thought about adding it to dangers, but I also developed a habit that don't really look at danger right now because it's so long and it's pretty repetitive. So I read the contents several times. So if there's something new, I might not notice. So what do you think about a new comment, maybe?
Yeah, I like the idea of like kind of pushing the documentation to the people instead of like letting people search into the documentation.
Exactly.
So pushing in a sense like, yeah, comments, or it could be in the merge request template or anything on the merge request page. I agree that the danger comment is probably overlooked. Like people are used to it. So if there's no failure, they will just keep it or look just at the roulette maybe. So yeah, a new comment could be useful. Yeah, as long as there's only one comment posted, because it's annoying to have a comment for each pipeline, maybe. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think we got that feedback in the initial rollout of selective tests with our spec, like multiple comments were not desired. I do kind of want to go back to what you said, Remy, at the start. Like, I think the simplest things we can do with the feedback we got is prioritize actionable things first on the page, maybe move things like the pipeline graph to a different page and link to it. But really reprioritize the information so it's clearer to people who land on the page what's most important to them at the top. And I like the idea that you had of making videos, something that is a lasting resource that we can refer to in the docs, that's quick on the labels and things like that. Yes, that creates a maintenance thing as things change, but I think that really gears with how some people learn, is interactive content versus written content.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, we could probably extract some of the gory details of the config into a specific page for people that want to really go deep into the config.
And just even moving it to the bottom, like you suggested, is a good first step. Like saying the labels and I don't know, there's probably 2 or 3 things on that page that are most important and kind of buried throughout. Just putting that up at the top is a good start.
Here's another idea. Maybe when a minimal pipeline is wrong, it will also apply a label, maybe a code. This is a minimal pipeline. And whenever a full pipeline ran, it removes the label.
I don't know if people would look at the labels. I think a comment is a good idea for informing there and starting with that and seeing where the feedback takes us. Because we're never going to make, like, I'm not trying to say this to be defeated, but we're always going to interfere with someone's ideal workflow. And that feedback is something we should be open to and listen to, and see how we can adjust or tweak things. But we need to start somewhere versus, trying to like debate around where to start. Not that I'm discouraging debates, like that could be totally misinterpreted. Like we should debate, but I don't want to just get stuck in a loop of considering everyone's ideal workflow. So I think the actionable things here, we're looking at reprioritizing the content on the pipeline pages, just moving things higher. Consider making some videos on the labels and a few of the other, like maybe just talking through minimal to full transition would be really helpful, and why we're doing that, providing the context on that. And then looking at a comment of informing people, or how we can inform this is a minimal pipeline versus a full pipeline. I haven't seen too many failures like this though, which I think is positive, because our spec, for one, that's been going for almost 2 months now. And I think this is the first problem like this that I recall where it's an MR was merged with a minimal pipeline that caused a broken master. There might have been one other one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's working pretty well. That's not, and I think that was initially that was the main fear, that would break master very frequently, like in the first iteration of this. So yeah, that's pretty cool to see that it's actually not that problematic. And yeah, I think a video would be useful in the sense that we could explain why, as you said, and even like show some graphs about pipeline duration and so that people understand that the feedback is coming like, I don't know, 15 minutes faster, maybe. I don't have the data, but
Yeah, when I first saw Drew's discussion, he shared something in development too. I was hesitant. I wanted to jump in and say, please don't just use this as an opportunity to default run all our spec all the time. This is an infrequent occurrence, and it kind of goes against the overall shortening the feedback loop goals that we're trying to do. But yeah, it was kind of, I had kids screaming and things, and I don't think I could have crafted a good message at that moment, so I just let it go. We did have Ezekiel join. Ezekiel, we kind of got through some of the front end feedback, but I'd be curious if you have if there's well, hold on, Remy, Jinshin, is there anything else on documentation? I think we had kind of those 3 clear actions.
Yeah, I think, I'm happy with the discussion, and we already have some action, so that's pretty cool.
Okay, but Ezekiel, thank you for joining. We had some great discussion with Mark earlier on front end. I'll say just front end feedback loops in general, and where there's points of friction. If you have other things to share, I really enjoy hearing from you on that. Mark also shared reaching out in the front end maintainer office hours or the front end weekly calls as good opportunities for us to collaborate more directly with front end and bring some ideas for feedback in those forums too.
Yeah, I didn't actually intend to really have any input.
Okay.
I was kind of jumping in just to observe. So I'll probably go back and have a look at the recordings and the discussions that were had previously. But yeah, I think, I'm happy to stay in touch, and I'll keep an eye on if there's anything that jumps out to me, particularly maybe when maintaining MRs or actually authoring my own MRs as well and feed that back. Is this probably the best avenue, or just sort of the development channel or something?
Yeah, I think we pay attention to the development channel. We have a team channel, G Engineering Productivity, that you could just drop a Slack message into. You could always create an issue and mention me, and we'll get it. We'll get it worked on from there too. I want to try to meet you in your ideal way of sharing versus trying to say this is the one way that you have to get in contact with our team. So these office hours are monthly. So I would say, don't wait for an office hours to bring something up, create an issue, drop send us a Slack message or start a thread would be great.
Cool.
Yeah.
No worries.
In part of where I kind of mentioned this to Mark, but the engineering productivity, we don't have a lot of front end development experience on our team. So as we look at how can we optimize the local developer tooling, or even the feedback you get in pipelines, we're pretty far removed in what we're doing or how to do that. And we really need a stronger partnership to help make sure that we're focusing, we're giving it the focus, giving the front end developer experience the focus it needs, I should say.
Awesome. No, that's really awesome to hear. I think part of what piqued my interest with this particular office hours was the analytics team. So I'm part of the Optimize team. Sorry, we were previously called analytics. And we actually use backend aspect fixtures quite a bit. So I'd be quite interested in reviewing what was kind of discussed earlier and seeing if there's any input that our team could have on that.
Yeah. Part of the challenge Mark shared, so maybe if you have a different challenge, we'd love to chat about that. But the challenge Mark was talking about is when you need to rebuild them locally, it takes a long time and it's a hard process. And he normally just downloads the artifacts and loads them locally. So we kind of talked about just having a script or some sort of local tooling to do that for you, since the fixtures are already built in the pipeline. And that's usually when you find out that something may be wrong. Are there other points of friction you run into with front end fixtures?
I think that's probably the main one for sure. Particularly I do a fair bit of work on value stream analytics. So those fixtures touch a lot of the database level stuff. So it's not uncommon for fixture generation to be 5-6 minutes locally. But I think probably I'm just trying to think if there's anything else particularly that stands out. I mean, possibly knowing when fixtures are broken. I've definitely come across one or two instances where it seems like they're passing in CI, but there might be some sort of minor misconfiguration in my local system. I might not have run some, I don't know, migrations or something. So locally, my fixtures might look okay. And then they might look okay in CI, but then when they merge into master, something else happens. But I'll definitely keep an eye out and ask around in the team as well, if anyone has other pain points that have come up. But those are probably the two that I can kind of recall over time.
Cool. Mark also talked about how like PO file generation with get text was problematic. The short version. So.
Yeah, that's I can definitely second that.
Okay, cool. Well, this is if there's nothing else, like I think we can call it here. This feedback has been really awesome. I think at the team, like I'd like to have Albert review this as well, because he's been working a lot on our front end optimizations. But there's definitely some things that we can look to do over the next few milestones to help that front end developer experience, making sure that those points of friction can at least be lessened, if not eliminated, which is what I was hoping to get. So this is, you guys have made my day, and it's 9 o'clock. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really cool to have this discussion. Thanks, Mark and Ezekiel. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for joining. You all have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you async and Slack and issues.
Thanks for your hard work, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.